What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another What If on the channel. Now, today we're going to be talking about what would happen if Deku was the reincarnation of Minato Namikaze. Yeah, I know. It's been a while, and I told you guys I would make this What If about a year ago, but I never did. Sorry, but it's here now. And for those of you who are members only, you guys can actually watch the whole series since it's already out now if you're a member. But all that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, the like goal for today's video is going to be 1,000 likes, and once you guys smash that, I'll be sure to drop part 2. That said, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
So the way that we start this What If off is going to be a little bit of a different way. Now, Deku normally just gets to live a normal, happy life and just gets to be OP in his school and, gets a different friendships type with Bakugo, considering that he still goes there. This time around, I figured that I would change things up a bit, considering that Minato in the Naruto storyline was an orphan. So I figured, hey, you know what? Let's do that. So now we're going to be starting off our story in a different spot. Inko pretty much is in a hoodie, right? She's in an all black outfit, and Hisashi's waiting for her in the car, right? Like they're really young and they don't want to have a kid. So, she had Izuku, and once he was born, she just put him on the doorstep. Izuku went on to pretty much be taken in by the orphanage, and after this, he was pretty much there for years and years to come. Nothing would really change about his situation until eventually he would get to the age of 4 years old. Once he could finally understand things, he could read books, and he could, kind of get a broader picture of how the world works, if that makes sense. Once he gets to this point, he would begin having a bunch of lucid dreams where he could kind of almost feel like he is looking through things from his own perspective, and he's doing crazy things that are just insane. It looks almost identical to him, but like strange, almost as if he's from a different world. It's interesting to Deku because he never quite understood it, but it just feels like it's him. But regardless though, he pretty much looks like a My Hero Academia version of Minato, and a young one at that, right? To the point where Izuku would kind of just continue having these dreams and would write these things down every time that he would see. He would note how strange it was that that person would always weave these sort of strange, fast-paced hand signs and would sort of concentrate and would be able to see so many different abilities, such as fire being shot out of the mouth and earth coming from nowhere, water creating floods that are just insane, like water coming in out of nowhere. And Izuku is just baffled. Like, Izuku is just impressed to no ends. Like, Izuku thinks that this is awesome, right? And what he would do is essentially, once he gets to the age of, like, let's say 6, like 5-ish, right? We could do 5 or 6, but I think I'm gonna go with 5. Let's say once he gets to the age of 5, he starts trying to learn about what his quirk is, right? And he would be told that his quirk is something called chakra, or life energy, and that it can use that to use strange abilities. And Deku would use this to pretty much start learning the ninja basics. He would remember back to those strange dreams that he had about Minato when he was in the academy, and he would use those same lessons to teach himself how to do different things. Instead of having real kunais, he would have to make fake ones out of paper with origami tools and stuff like that, and he would pretty much practice by using those things. Once he gets to the age of 7, one day, he would be at the age of 7, and at this point he would know the very fundamentals of what it takes to be a ninja, not really having learned any jutsus yet, but getting around to the point where he wants to learn about wall walking and water walking and tree walking, right? And so one day, a pro hero would actually walk into the orphanage, and it would be an older man, right? But the pro hero would walk into the orphanage, and he would actually watch as Deku would pretty much be training, right? Deku was trying to run up the wall, and the interesting thing would be that the kid is sticky. He's sticking to the wall like Spider-Man. The man would find that it very much so interesting, and he would be extremely impressed with Deku. As it would be at this point that the man would walk over towards Deku, and they would begin to initiate a conversation where he would ask him what he was doing over there. And Izuku says that he's trying to train his quirk, that he thinks if he's able to work hard enough, he would be able to walk on walls or maybe even waters, considering if he masters his quirk, he could do many abilities. And the man would think to himself that this kid This kid is special. He's a retired pro hero, and since his wife died, he's needed some company. So what does he do? He continues talking to Izuku, and he would realize that he actually really likes Izuku's vibe. He just likes everything about Izuku. He thinks to himself that the kid is cool. The kid's all right. And so from here, what would actually end up happening is that Izuku would go on to pretty much, Izuku would go on to pretty much be adopted by this guy, and he would just end up taking him back home, where Izuku would end up having to live in a new place. And he works with this man whose name is going to be Saejima for the following rest of the story, right? And what would end up pretty much happening is that they would go on to bond. Like, Izuku would finally have some sort of father, grandfather-like figure in his life who would be there to teach him right from wrong, who would be there for him whenever he falls or slips, whenever he fails, always encouraging him, and knowing that someday Izuku was going to be great. Someday Izuku was going to be a pro hero. Saejima would always talk about it, and always does, right? And Izuku just continues training, learning the basics of taijutsus, beginning to actually learn how to use real shurikens and also kunais, considering that Saejima would be able to provide that stuff for Deku. Now, eventually Deku would actually be interested in swords. So he would, actually ask to have some swords and stuff like that, right? And, that would be very interesting because Saejima would wonder to himself, hey, like, should I actually give this kid a sword? Like, isn't that kind of dangerous? You know what I mean? Like, it is, but still. And he would just be thinking to himself, it's kind of dangerous. I'm not sure about this one, but he does it anyways. And Izuku would go on to train with swords, and he would just begin to learn so many brand new taijutsu-like techniques that Minato would have had during his early age and years. Eventually, we would get to the point where Izuku would turn 14 years old, and a huge time skip would happen, right? And at this point, Izuku would finally be getting ready to get into UA and take his entrance exam and things like that. Izuku would get dropped off by Saejima, who would then make his way back home, seeing as Izuku was just going to be taking the bus back home. And once this happens, Izuku would make his way towards the front of UA, where he would end up noticing a girl with brown hair. He thinks she's really pretty, but he would continue to walk by, considering he's not going to slip and fall. And from here, he makes his way to the podium, where he would pretty much end up sitting down and end up pretty much taking the test. Ida, still like a little brainiac, would end up calling out Present Mike, to which Present Mike is like, yo kid, if you would only listen to me, you realize that I was gonna get to that point. And Ida just sits down, and this time he doesn't be like, oh, you over there, be quiet, right? But regardless, eventually Izuku finds his way outside. And once he's there, Izuku would end up not actually seeing a rock at the front of the line. Instead, he sees this really rowdy, angry girl going towards the top of the front, where she's like, get out of my way, right? And, she's like, get out of the way, extras. And Izuku would be like, what? Like, that's interesting, right? He's looking at her, and, she looks at him for a split moment before turning back to the front and making her way towards the front. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to drop a big, massive bomb on you. Katsuki Bakugo is going to be gender bended in this version, and his name is going to be, drumroll please, Katsumi. We're going to be going with the name Katsumi for this what if specific. Now, her name is going to be Katsumi, and pretty much we're just going to be saying that Bakugo, instead of being born a boy, he's just born a girl. He's still, he's actually going to be a lot different, considering that he's now a girl, and he's going to have a lot of different likes and dislikes, but she wants to prove that she can become a pro hero and that a girl can actually be the #1 hero, right? That's her goal. And Izuku, he's pretty cool. And because, she's still raised in the same household, she has that same fiery personality as her mother. And some of you guys might be like, okay, but why would you gender bend? Like, what's up with that, Xehther? Like, you're weird. Like, you're so weird. Who does that? Think about it. I mean, nobody else in the My Hero Academia storyline really has that same temperament that Kushina has. And I think that by doing this, we could kind of give a little polar opposite of what, Kushina was. Or no, not polar opposite, but kind of something similar to what Kushina is in the Naruto storyline, where she can be kind, but she also has that fiery temper, right? And so I thought that that would be something cool to add to the story. But regardless, eventually the test would start. And as soon as it does, Izuku would just rush towards the front of everybody, right? And as the crowd is just overwhelming the entrance, Izuku just walks over the wall gate, right? And he jumps over, and immediately he would jump over from building to building, running on top of them, doing some sort of strange parkour, getting ahead of everybody to where most of the robots are at, right? And immediately Izuku, using his pouch that he was allowed to use for this exam, would throw out a bunch of senbon, or no, not senbon, but kunais, right? Now those kunais would go flying towards the direction of those robots, and the robots would have to pretty much like try to attack Izuku, but it would be pretty much pointless because Izuku would just begin teleporting around like boom, 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 boom. Like, just imagine Minato going around and just trying to destroy robots with the kunai. kunai. Like Izuku teleports in, grabs the kunai, slash, 3 points. Grabs another kunai, slash, 1 point. Another kunai, 2 points, 3 points, 1 point. You get the drill, right? And that's pretty much what would end up happening because he doesn't have the Rasengan quite yet. He hasn't learned that. That's a very difficult jutsu to learn. And so is the Flying Raijin, but Izuku studied that the most. Like that was the coolest thing that he wanted. And that's why he ends up getting it at the early age of 14. But regardless, Izuku being at this age wouldn't be able to spam it for too long because his chakra pool isn't that massive, but he does have enough and he has mastered it to the point where he can use it with low chakra consumption, or at least relatively low, right? But Izuku just continues to go in there and just bam, 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 like completely destroying the robots. And it's actually really, really cool to look at because you just see Izuku there and now he's over here, and he's just cutting these robots up left and right. And everybody who would be watching this, aka the heroes who would be like, oh, okay, like that kid has potential, they would just be thinking that kid has so much potential, like it's insane. And Izuku's just destroying robots and he's just showing off his natural talents to the point where eventually he would get to the point where he shoots a wind style jutsu right at one of the robots, a one pointer, and he would blow it back to the ground before jumping up and grabbing 2 kunais and just coming down and slashing the robot, right? The robot would then go on to explode and Izuku would create a mud wall jutsu to stop the impact. And they would begin to notice how Izuku looks like he has multiple quirks. It's insane. And All Might would just be thinking to himself, oh, for one, is this your doing? He begins getting angry. But as he watches the kid fight, he doesn't fight the way that All For One does, and it doesn't look like he's influenced by evil. But All Might definitely wants to talk to this kid, considering it seems like he has multiple quirks. Regardless though, eventually Izuku, after destroying more and more robots, finally a loud rumbling would be heard on the ground, right? And it would be like just everybody starts running away, and it would be at this moment that Izuku turns to that direction and notices, what's that? He looks up and he sees just this gigantic 0-point monster thing, right? And it would be at this point that Izuku notices that there's this girl that was actually trapped under some rubble. It would be like this dirty blonde girl, right? And Izuku realizes it was that girl at the front. So in a split second, as everybody's running away, Izuku throws a kunai as hard as he can and would catch it. And he grabs onto Katsumi, grabs her by the arm, and then teleports away as the 0-pointer was just about to stomp on them. But Izuku was capable of saving her just in the nick of time before the pro heroes that were on standby were going to actually have to do something. And Katsumi, she would think to herself, how did you do that? As Izuku explains, teleportation quirk. And she says, but I saw you shoot fire from your mouth. How many quirks do you have? Izuku would be like, it's all part of one quirk. It allows me to do a bunch of different things. It's a very, very interesting quirk. It's life energy. And she would think, well, if I have life energy too, right? I'm alive. And Izuku would say, no, it's nothing like that. But from here, he would look around as there's actually 30 seconds left. And Izuku thinks to himself, I got to get more points. As he throws, teleports to another kunai that was near a not the 0-pointer, but another robot, and would proceed to get about 5 more points right as the test would end. And at the end of it, Izuku would end up getting a grand total of 300 points because of the fact that he destroyed like 100 something robots, right? And he also ended up getting 50 points from rescuing Katsumi from her horrific death that was most likely going to happen, right? And from here, Izuku is just smiling. Like he thinks that he did a good thing today. Like he finally showed what it was like to be a hero without being a real hero, right? He didn't need a license to know that he was going to save people, that he was going to jump in whenever he was needed, that he was going to do the right thing every single time. Izuku doesn't need some hero status to do that because that's just who he is. Izuku is just a great person, a great hero. And from here, Izuku grabs his stuff, grabs his bag and puts all of his tools away, makes his way towards the bus station where, it would be like dim light. He gets in and finally he makes his way home. As Izuku's on his way home, the train would begin shaking and, Izuku would realize that something's up, right? This is when he goes towards the back as he notices that this guy is actually currently getting mugged in the back of the train, right? And Izuku going over there, he would think to himself that it might be illegal to use his powers, but it's the right thing to do. And so from here, Izuku proceeds to essentially just rush in there and be like, hey, stop. As the guy would be like, get out of here, kid, before you get hurt. And Izuku would just think to himself, yeah, I definitely need to show him I'm serious. So from here, he throws his kunai and he would catch it as he places the kunai straight to the neck of the guy. And he would say, I said, stop. As from here, the criminal looks back to Izuku with a shiver in his body, and Izuku would tell him, sit down right next to me or I'll kill you. And from here, the man would just immediately like calm down, sit down, and the other guy who was actually getting mugged would be like, thank you, under his breath, right? As Izuku would sit right next to this guy, and the dude would be terrified because like Izuku is 14 years old, but he just said that with no mercy, no care, almost as if he has killed before. And he never heard something like that from anybody. No gang members, no thugs, no villains. Izuku seemed like he was dead serious about truly like taking his life away from him in an instant. And that was truly terrifying to that man. But regardless, they would make their way towards their stops, and finally Izuku would make his way home. He enters the house with his house keys, and once he does, he would notice that Saijima's on the ground. Izuku's like, Saijima, stop playing, get up. And he would not get up until Izuku would go over and be like, Saijima, get up, get up. He begins trying to shake him and be like, no, come on, wake up, you got this. You're gonna wake up, you're just kidding, right? Saijima, please get up. As he realizes that he's not getting up, so he immediately grabs onto the body and just teleports around to the location of UA High School where he knows that Recovery Girl is at, right? She kisses Saijima, and from here he would slightly regain consciousness and begin getting healed like a little bit, right? As he looks towards the direction of Deku and he's like, you made it, kid. And Izuku's like, what happened? And Saijima's like, I'm getting old. It's harder for me to be around now. I think I lived a good life, kid. It's about time that you move on. I already wrote a will. You're gonna be keeping everything. Just promise me something, kid. As it starts to low-key start flatlining, and he's like, he's coughing, and he says, you'll become a great hero someday, kid. Become number one. As he just flatlines, and Izuku just has to watch as Saijima's arm just falls, and Izuku holds on to it as he screams out, Saijima! You know what I mean? And from here, Recovery Girl just looks at him, she nods her head no, and Izuku just, he begins bawling out like never before, because that was like the only person in his life that Izuku, as of this moment, truly cared about. And Izuku would finally feel what it's like to lose somebody. And Izuku would think to himself that he never wants to feel that feeling again, right? And so what would end up happening after this is Izuku has to pretty much go home and like for the next couple of days until he gets his acceptance letter, just be sitting there in this big house all by himself, just like alone. He has nothing to do but train, and that's all he does. For the next couple of days, he continues working on that jutsu, and Izuku's saddened, you know what I mean? Like, he's not the same after the death of Saijima. I mean, how could you? You just literally lost like your father figure. You'll never be the same after that, but it's something that Izuku has to learn to live with now, and he does. He has to learn to live with it. He has to learn to cope with these things. And, in my personal, experience, Izuku will be fine. But eventually, though, Izuku does get to the point where he gets his acceptance letter and is happy. And, he would say, thanks, Saijima, for always looking out for me. And from here, he begins getting smiley and happier because he knows that Saijima's watching over him from, you guys know where. And, Izuku just happy. He knows that he has to complete his goal of becoming the number one hero for Saijima because he promised him. And a promise is a promise. From here, Izuku would make his way towards UA the very next day as he cooks himself some breakfast and makes his way towards UA, right? Considering he would wake up a bit late, he just flying Raijins in there. And once at the gates of UA, Izuku would just smile to himself as he thinks, finally here. Today, Saijima, is the start of making you proud. As he would say, hopefully you're watching me. And Saijima up in heaven would just be smiling as he thinks to himself that, go get him, kid. As Izuku walks into the classroom, sits down, and realizes that there's some sort of sleeping bag there. Izuku from here senses the energy signature of Aizawa and would think to himself, most likely our teacher. He sits down, and from here the grumpy girl would be in the front fighting with some blue-haired boy who would be telling her to get the legs off of that desk, that it is UA property and that she cannot disrespect this by putting her feet up on top of the desk. Izuku would smirk to himself as he watches Katsumi argue with Ida, and she pretty much ends up finally putting her legs down once Aizawa gets up and announces, alright, settle down. He finally ends up calling them all outside, and it would be at this point that Izuku would make his way towards the changing room where he finally begins to, change. You know, it's changing for a reason. But anyways, he starts changing, right? And everybody watching would be like, yo, dude, you're ripped, because Izuku actually has a very, very toned body. And, you know, Izuku would think, thanks, you know, I've worked hard for a couple of years. And from here, you know, he finally makes his way outside to the point where Aizawa would end up throwing the ball as far as he can and saying, look, this is my score. Today you're going to be tested on your quirks and seeing if you will be allowed to stay in UA. And from here, Araka's like, but what about orientation? And Aizawa says, I can run my classroom however I want. I don't believe you need orientation. We have 3 years to get you guys prepared for the real world, and I'm not planning on wasting any of those years. As from here, Aizawa looks to the direction of Izuku and says, here, kid, throw that as far as you can. And Izuku says, and I can use any means necessary, am I right? And Aizawa would be like, as long as you stay within the circle. And from here, Izuku just thinks to himself, all right, stay inside the circle. Shouldn't be too hard. As from here, Izuku would begin to pretty much just charge strength in his arm with chakra, something that's not, you know, something that Sakura does where she charges up her fist to be able to be super strong, right? And Izuku just does that to his arm, tossing it very, very much so far until Aizawa shows it off to the class and says, 500 meters. And from here, everybody would be like, 500? Wow, this sounds like fun. We really get to let loose at UA. This is awesome. But Aizawa just looks back to the people and he's like, fun? Awesome? I'll show you guys fun. Whoever comes in last place is expelled.